Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transue, aka Detective Ev, and I will be flying solo for today's episode. We are doing a lab and learn with the MRT food sensitivity test. That's the mediator release test. So welcome back to Lab and Learn if you haven't been on in a while. As promised, we are getting this rolling again regularly. So we'll be back with you guys next week, which is, let me see. I believe that is March 11th. That would make sense. But the week after that, we will not be with you. In fact, we won't be doing any podcasts at all. But we do have a reasonable trade-off for you guys that I think you will very much enjoy. And this is the first time we're announcing this on the podcast. We are doing something called Holistic Health Week. And we would love for you to be a part of this. It is completely free. And it's probably one of the biggest events we've ever done for FDN. It's certainly the biggest event we've ever done in 1 week. So what we are doing, as crazy as this sounds, is there are going to be 30 plus live interviews done Monday through Friday, and I will be hosting all of them. So I will be doing all the interviews for this. We have names like Dr. Tom O'Brien, Ben Azadi. So many more people are going to be involved in this. You can actually check a list of the names at the link. So what you want to do is go to fdntraining.com/HHW2025. That's fdntraining.com/HHW2025. I cannot wait for this. As much as speaking as I've done in my life, I have never done something quite like this. So we are super excited to have you guys there. Also, if you don't know and you're someone that is consuming our content because you're interested in FDN, maybe you want to become one day, but you're not one currently, we do have a price increase to the course, a pretty major one, coming up on April 1st of 2025. And so Holistic Health Week is a great thing for you to get involved in and participate in to see if you would like to do this course, because if you do, then you can get in before the price increase. So that is the entire week of March 17th through March 21st. It's going to be awesome. And again, that's fdntraining.com/HHW2025. All right, what are we here to do today? Well, we are here to do a lab and learn on the MRT food sensitivity test. And what I'm going to do first is help kind of make a case for food sensitivity testing. Because if you're in this space, you might already know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you'll see online people arguing as to whether or not we actually need food sensitivity testing, whether or not it's actually important. I 100% believe that there is a really good argument for this. And again, that's what I'm going to present to you guys today. So I will get my screen shared here and we will get right into this. If you do like this type of content and you want this nerdier stuff, please make sure that you are subscribed. I think it's in the bottom right of the screen. And then we will be able to show the next lab and learn to you guys. And we would love to have you there for that. If you can't tell, I'm stalling as I figure out my share screen. Almost got it, I think. If you are in the chat, let me know. Were any of you at the Biohacker Expo this past weekend? Did I get to see any of you guys there? Did I get to meet any of you for the first time? I would love to know that, please. And then also, if you currently use food sensitivity testing, let me know which one you use and why. And if you don't use food sensitivity testing, let me know why. Maybe you just don't have access to it. That could be a very reasonable reason. Or maybe you don't believe in it. That's also valid. But we will show you a good case again as to why it is a good thing to be using. Sorry, guys, I don't know. I might just have to present this in full screen here to you. All right, I think that's just what we're going to have to do. So I will share my entire screen for you guys. Thanks for bearing with me. And should give you guys the full screen now. Tracy, could you put in the chat for me really quick if this is doing the full screen, please? And we can just do that in the private chat. Oh, cool. Never mind. I can see it. Awesome. Thank you guys for bearing with me. So to make a case for food sensitivity testing, what I would like to do first, I see Debbie said, hey, Evan, hey, Debbie. What I would like to do first, again, is make a case for this and kind of define these terms so we know what we are talking about here. So the first thing you need to know is, what is a food sensitivity? Well, the best way to figure out what a food sensitivity is figure out what it's not, in my opinion. So the first thing I wanted to touch on was a food allergy. I hear a lot of people sometimes using these terms sensitivity and allergy interchangeably. I would make a very strong argument that these are not the same thing, and I will show you why. A food allergy has a definition. It is an IgE immune response. So IgE means immunoglobulin E. It's a specific type of immune response. And for the sake of the test that we're going to talk about today, the mediator release test, IgE is also what's known as a mediator. It's something that gets released when your body is reacting to a specific food protein, a family of food, chemicals, whatever it might be. So food allergies are always going to be IgE immune responses. I'd be curious in the chat. Let me know if you've ever received this test. I actually am someone who did get this test done when I was a kid and they were trying to figure out my health issues. Have you ever had that test done where your back's actually exposed and they kind of lay out, it's almost like a little square thing and there's a bunch of needles. It doesn't really hurt, but they kind of lay out this thing on your back and they're trying to see if any bumps come up where they laid out the needles, because then they can kind of base if you have an allergy or not without sending you fully into anaphylaxis or something. So I'd love to know if anyone has ever had to have that test done. If not, it's probably a good idea. It's always good to know if you are allergic to a food. Most people would know if they are allergic to a food, and that's because IgE immune responses are typically associated with more extreme reactions. And definitely the most extreme reactions you're almost always going to see from food allergies. So again, these are things like anaphylaxis. It could be as benign as hives or watery eyes. It could be more serious, like you feel like your throat is closing, which very well might be a part of anaphylaxis. These are all the people that if as a kid you had to sit at the peanut table, or kids who had to sit at the peanut table, or maybe you have kids in school right now and that there's a peanut or allergy table, these are the kids that have IgE responses. They are not sensitive to the foods. Well, I don't want to get too technical yet, but in theory, they could be sensitive and allergic. But what that table guarantees is an allergy. It does not guarantee a sensitivity. Let's word it that way. So this is an allergy, probably pretty basic for a lot of you guys, or even review for some of you. So let's go to the next one here. A food intolerance. This is something that you hear about a lot as well. They'll say, I'm intolerant to this food. I can't tolerate it, would be probably the language that most people would use. But what is a food intolerance? Is this the same as an allergy? Is this the same as a sensitivity? Well, a food intolerance is actually not an immune response at all necessarily. So that's one of the unique things about an intolerance. That does not imply that there's any immune response. What it mostly implies is an inability to process or digest the food or break down the food. What is the most common intolerance that you hear about out there? A lactose intolerance. Now, if a lactose intolerance was an immune response, well, you could never do anything about it, really. You would just stop consuming things that have lactose. But it's not an immune response. It's an inability to break it down. And so what do? You take some type of digestive enzyme that has lactase in it. So you might take a formula that has lactase in it. People that are lactose intolerant, especially if they're younger, I find what happens a lot of the time is they don't get sent a full digestive enzyme formula. They just have these little tablets that help them with the breakdown of lactose. It's just lactase and whatever other, God knows what fillers they put in those tablets, but they are able to break it down once you give them the proper thing to help them. In this case, that's lactase. So this does not suggest an immune response. It just suggests an inability to digest or process the food. Moving on to the next one. I want to touch on one other thing actually before we get to food sensitivity. I want to touch on celiac as well. I forgot, because celiac is something that I think people lump into all of this. And then they might wonder, as I'm defining these things, well, where does this fall into the mix? Like, how does celiac come in? So celiac is a specific type of an immune response. And the reason it's slightly different from general sensitivities and allergies is because it means that there's a direct attack on the small intestine. So at least 1 out of 100 people in America have celiac. It's probably a little bit more than that because it's very hard to diagnose, because it can look like a million other things. So celiac might look like mental health issues in some people. Why? Because as that immune response is being targeted to that small intestine, people have malabsorption issues. They're not getting the right amount of micronutrients. They're not getting the right amount of macronutrients either. And let's be honest, most people don't walk around eating perfectly healthy. Are most people walking around eating the right amount of protein every single day? Are they walking around getting their vitamins and minerals perfectly? No, that typically is not what's happening. So if you have someone with celiac, especially if they've had it for a while or since they were born, what's going to happen is those malabsorption issues are going to lead to a variety of other problems. And so it can be hard to diagnose celiac sometimes because the person might be very disconnected from where you would think it'd be. You think that this is just a gut issue, and at its core, it might be, but it might not present that way. I actually know a young woman, I won't share her story because I don't think she shares this publicly, but I know a young woman, I met her years ago, and she had celiac, or has celiac rather, and she actually was admitted to, I'm sure there's a better way to say this now. I know it's not a psych ward. I don't think that's fair to say, but she was admitted to a hospital for severe mental health issues because she was actually putting herself in danger. Now, what's interesting about this woman is she's genuinely one of the smartest people I've ever met. So this is not someone who is normally mentally unstable or someone that's hard to get along with or deal with. This is actually an incredibly high-performing individual that is in research, neuroscience, all this kind of stuff at college, or I guess when she was in college. And yet she's being put into the mental side of a hospital because she's such a danger to herself. Well, it turns out she had celiac disease that was undiagnosed. And when you can't get any of those nutrients, and maybe you do have some type of genetic susceptibility to certain mental health issues, bam, that's what happened to her. So this is celiac. It's a specific type of an immune response. It attacks the small intestine. And I just wanted to mention that one today because I think it is worth throwing into a conversation around sensitivities and why we might test for these things. So let's get to the one that we actually promised today. And I promise I'm going to have a lab result for you guys as well. I'm actually going to do mine. So stay tuned for that. Food sensitivities. What are they? What is the case for them? Food sensitivities are basically any immune response to a food that is not an allergy. So in a sense, I might define almost like a Venn diagram. I might overlap things. I might define celiac as a type of food sensitivity. Generally speaking, though, I would rule out celiac as a separate thing. Allergies are definitely a separate thing. And I'm going to refer to food sensitivities as any immune response that is not IgE, and let's even say that's not celiac. It is also not an intolerance, remember, because an intolerance does not imply an immune response. So a food sensitivity is going to mean that you have some immune reaction that's happening to the food or several foods. It's usually a handful of foods. And the issue with this and why there's so much debate around it is because there's not just one type of way, there's not just one type of immune response outside of allergies that your body can respond to a food with. In fact, there's hundreds that we know of. It might be in the thousands at this point. And the chances are we're only going to figure out more and more ways that your body can potentially develop an immune response to a food protein. Why is that an issue? Because even if we knew about all of these things, testing for it would be hard. So one of the most common food sensitivity tests that you'll hear about out there is something called the ELISA. Western medicine will even sometimes go to this, interestingly enough. And the ELISA is an IgG test. That was like one of the first food sensitivity tests on the market. IgG sounds like IgE, right? So both of them are immunoglobulin G and immunoglobulin E respectively, although different immune responses have different symptomology associated with them. So whereas an IgE might be these more extreme responses and potentially even life-threatening to the person, you're not going to see that with IgG. You might see some overlap with the watery eyes or a sneeze or some hives even. You could see that overlap, but IgG gets a little tricky because it could also be the reason that this person got a headache. It could be the reason that you got stomach pain. Food sensitivities also lead to other things. It could be a trigger for an autoimmune condition. The problem is, again, there's so many different ways that the body can respond to a food that some people will say, well, why bother testing at all? We just need to figure out how to heal and seal the gut because that's likely where a lot of these food sensitivities develop. And that's probably true. Well, at least the latter part of that is true, that food sensitivities probably develop for that reason, because when you have a leaky gut, these undigested or not fully digested food proteins get directly into the bloodstream. The bloodstream says, hey, that food protein's not supposed to be here. This food protein from an avocado is not supposed to be here. I better attack this to protect my host. The host is you. The host is me. So as that food protein goes into the bloodstream, it says attack, attack, attack. Now, again, you might not even know you have a food sensitivity to this. IgG, by the way, can be up to 3 days delayed. So how confusing is that? There's so many people that might make an argument and say, well, you don't need to test for food sensitivities. You could keep a food log. Here's the problem. IgG, just one way that you can react to a food, remember, out of the hundreds, if not thousands, that could take 72 hours. So how good would I need to be at food logging to identify that a tomato I eat today on Tuesday is the reason I have a headache on Friday, or the reason that I'm getting some type of skin breakout on Thursday? That's confusing, and it's just one way of many that you can react to a food. So it sounds so far like I'm almost making the case for these people, like, oh yeah, you shouldn't use food sensitivity tests then, right? This would be a problem. Well, unless you had a test that could look for a bunch of different immune responses at one time. And you might say, well, that has to be tens of thousands of dollars, right? I know an IgG test is probably 200 something. IgA, IgM, they can be 200 something. So if you're doing hundreds, if not thousands of ways, that must mean then that you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on this stuff. Not the case. The food sensitivity test that we recommend most at FDN, and I say most because this is for mostly our American clients, patented MRT test. This is something called the mediator release test, and this is created by Oxford Biomedical Labs. Now, the folks at Oxford Biomedical Labs are brilliant because they had these questions years ago, and that's why they patented the technology. And they said, well, wait a second. If all these immune responses, ones that we know about, and even potentially ones that we don't know about, maybe if they're coming from a similar place, we can test that instead of the individual immune responses. Brilliant idea. So what the MRT does is it measures volumetric changes in your white blood cell. Why? Because the white blood cell is where a lot of the mediators are released from. So what they're looking at under a microscope is saying, okay, if I take Evan or if I take Debbie and I expose her white blood cells to an avocado food protein, or a food protein found in avocado, let's say it that way, or a protein found in beef, or a protein found in wheat. Let's see how much that white blood cell changes in size. Now, when they're first doing this, I've never talked to them about this, but I'd have to imagine one of the issues that occurred when they first started this is there's always going to be some minor immune reaction to a food. That's actually really common. Like a little immune reaction when you eat food is really standard. That doesn't mean it's clinically relevant or bad for the person, but there's going to be something there. So the obvious question that I would have if I'm in the lab and I'm first doing this is, cool, we know that there's going to be some volumetric change. There's going to be a size change. How much of a size change is relevant, though? You know what I mean? Like, let's say you know that there's going to be some size change, even if the person's not having an extreme reaction to this. So if there's always going to be some, but a big reaction is going to have more, at what point do we say this is an actual sensitivity? At what point in size change do we say that this is actually relevant? This is something that is going to clinically correlate. Well, over the years, as Oxford has kind of perfected this technology and continues to perfect it, they have gotten pretty good at this. So at this point, they now have a 93.6% replicability rate, which means a variety of things. But one of the things that it means is that it's accurate. And what does accurate mean then? Accurate means that if they tell you that you are kind of sensitive to something or definitely sensitive to something, you actually are. It correlates with the person's symptomology. And if the person is to remove the foods that they suggest for some period of time, ideally this person should feel better. And they have the research to back that up. That's on their website. It's called nowleap.com. You can see the research there. So the case for food sensitivity testing. Now I've made a case as to why we can, or how we can identify a variety of food sensitivities with one test without spending $10,000, because for FDNs, it's in like the 300 range. If you look at what it is publicly, it's a lot more than that. So that's actually one of the rare labs where they do hook us up a little bit and we get a pretty notable discount there. So now we can test for it cheap. The next question is, well, Ev, does it matter? Didn't you just say that if someone has a leaky gut, which all of us have in today's world, they're more likely to deal with things like food sensitivities or develop things like food sensitivities. Wouldn't that mean then we just address the gut and we don't have to worry about the food sensitivities? The answer is yeah, with an asterisk. And the reason that there's an asterisk there is because what helps someone heal and seal their gut? Rather, wording it differently, what are some of the things that contribute to a leaky gut? Stress on the body in any form. There are studies right on PubMed that show you that overexercising can lead to leaky gut. Mental stress can lead to leaky gut. Glyphosate, which is in everything, and we're all exposed to this if you're in America, that leads to leaky gut. Antibiotics can contribute to intestinal permeability. I'm not saying that any of these things are, well, glyphosate, I would argue, is terrible, but all these things might have their time and place. But the bottom line is, this is all stuff that increases intestinal permeability. So if we have a million things in our world, and a million things in our world that can lead to increased stress, and we have to fight those every single day, and some of them we might not be able to avoid. Maybe the mental stress of our job is contributing to our gut dysfunction. Well, we can't just get up and quit because we worked with an FDN practitioner. So I don't know about you. If I am someone's client, I would want to know that they're doing as many things for me as possible that give me actions that empower me, or give me action steps that empower me, and that give me guidelines that I can actually do something about. I might not be able to quit my job the next day is what I'm saying, but I definitely can remove a food. If I'm training for an ultra marathon and I'm really dedicated to this, and that training and that aspiration is something that actually brings me joy, I might not be willing to stop that right away, even though I'm working with you as my practitioner, but I can change my diet around to help hit the macronutrient ratios that I need to support the fuel that is going into this endurance training that I'm doing. Food sensitivities are almost this self-fulfilling thing because, and it's a downward spiral as well. That'd be a good way to think of it, because the leaky gut can cause food sensitivities, but food sensitivities contribute to inflammation and stress, which contributes to leaky gut. So now you have a person that might be eating several foods that they're highly reactive to, which is worsening the leaky gut. So does that mean that we can never heal someone or help them heal themselves if they take the right action steps for gut healing? They can't remove food sensitivities without removing them for some period, or eliminate the food sensitivities without first removing the food for some period. No, it doesn't mean that. You probably can. But I would say that you're delaying the person's healing process significantly. You could be delaying it months, if not even a couple of years. So if we have a tool that can show us very accurately what this person's reacting to, why would we not use it? And that could spread even to an IgG test. That could spread even to an IgA or IgM test, which might be the only thing available to you if you're not in America. I would make a case that these are very beneficial things to be using while you're also taking care of the other stuff in the person's life, like addressing their gut, etc. Now, would I ever use this by itself and say that I'm an FDN practitioner? No. The only time that I've ever used this by itself is if I'm getting someone who is coming to me on the SAD diet, and they're, wanting to work with the functional medicine practitioners, but they're so new to this that they need a lot more help. So when I say they're still on the SAD diet, I mean they're on the standard American diet. I had a client, Kate, and I'm using her name because she shares this publicly. She was dealing with very high TSH. She had just gotten diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and she was ready to make a change. And she followed myself and some other FDNs, and she just wanted to work with someone right away, even though she was still eating fast food at the time. She was really going to have to make some big life changes. So I said, what are we starting with all these other labs for? We have so much other lifestyle stuff to work on. We might as well start there. So we just did lifestyle changes and an MRT food sensitivity test. That's the only time I would be running this as a standalone test, is when I'm seeing someone that is so new to this and still very much stuck in the Western processed foods that they need to see something on a lab that says this food is bad for you. Because when they see it, we're all like little kids at the end of the day, right? We see red, we're like, that bad. We see green, we say that good. And then this test has yellow, we're like, okay, that's okay. So what was on hers was a bunch of stuff, but things that you would often expect with someone suffering with an autoimmune disease, because she also had Hashimoto's, which is true for the majority of people who have hypothyroidism. She was sensitive to a lot of nightshades. She was sensitive to dairy. She was sensitive to wheat. Really common profile of someone who is dealing with autoimmune stuff. Now, what did I do with her? I just said, let's just start with the wheat and dairy, because I know that's going to be tough enough for you. So she started with just the wheat and dairy. We did that for 30 days. She also did start taking some medication at this time, to be clear. Her TSH dropped from a 211. No, I did not say that wrong. I actually have the lab results, by the way. 211 to a 4.5 with the medication mixed with the lifestyle changes. And she lost over 30 pounds in 1 month. For anyone that does the math, they're like, that's not possible to lose 30 pounds in 1 month because of the calorie intake or the lack of calories that you would need. I agree that you can't lose that much fat or muscle in a month, generally speaking. But if you are inflamed and you're retaining more water because of it, yes, that can happen. That has weight to it. So she literally looked like a different person in 1 month just from removing the food sensitivities. So I would say that's a pretty strong case for using this type of stuff. Debbie said, great presentation. I will catch the recording for the rest. Well, thank you very much, Debbie. Cool. Are you guys convinced that maybe food sensitivities have some validity here? I would hope that you are. So what I'm going to do is, if you guys have any questions in the chat, please let me know. I'm going to pull up the lab results here because I admit not as many, there's quite a few of you on now, but not as many people were on in the beginning. I was fumbling over my screen share here. So I accidentally deleted some of my labs, and I'm going to look back and see if there's any questions. And I'm going to pull up my lab right here because I really want to get you guys my actual food sensitivity test here. Let's see. Or I might have to go, I have so many of these from clients over the years. So if I have a client that I know, all right, well, she shared this publicly. So you're about to get Amanda's today. Sorry, Amanda, if you're out there somewhere watching. This is from years ago. But she let me share her lab results live. So I will stop sharing this part of my screen and we will move over here. So here you guys go. This is going to be fun. Right. Un momento, por favor. So I'll give you actually a background on her while I'm pulling this up so I don't keep you guys waiting. So her name's Amanda. Again, shared her story fully publicly on video with me. So this is all stuff that I can say. Amanda had kind of an interesting story. So she, unfortunately, her dad passed away in a house fire when she was really young. And because of that, there was obviously a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff that she was dealing with. So when she came to me, it had been like 10 years since that happened. And she had been to therapy, did all this stuff and got some help. And so, of course, my initial response and thoughts were like, I don't know if I can help this person. Maybe this is too deep of trauma. Maybe that's why she doesn't feel good. But she swore left, right, up and down to me that, no, I've done like a lot of this therapy work. I've done this stuff. And I know that there's something more going on. So after kind of doing intake with her and really thinking about all of this, I trusted her to make her own judgment for her own body. And we ran some lab tests. So we did a full thing with her, but here are her lab test results that came back. And that is a little background on her. She was dealing with mental health challenges, by the way. I don't think I got to mention that here. So here you go. Here are her food sensitivity test results. I'll make sure this is zoomed in enough for you guys. I'll actually go one more up. Again, she shared her stuff publicly. That's why I'm sharing her lab results. And this was actually, it was almost 5 years ago now. Wow, this was back in 2020. So Amanda got these results back. And as you can see, we have some yellows. I'm also interested in the reds, the soybean, cow's milk down there. I'm going a little fast just to show you guys the overall picture of the test. And so now I'll break down this test for you in relation to this client. So again, review of Amanda. Terrible, tragic event that happened when she was younger. Her mom was very open to therapy and immediately took her there. She felt at that time she had done a lot of the work that she could do outside of other health habits to work on her mental health issues. She was on something called an SNRI. So for those of you that know SSRIs, those are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. SNRIs are serotonin neuroepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So it's thought to be a similar mechanism to an SSRI. Oh, did this stop sharing for you guys? Sorry, guys. It's thought to be a similar mechanism to an SSRI, but it obviously affects neuroepinephrine as well. I don't know why you guys can't see that anymore. This completely disappeared for me. I feel like I should be the one that's pretty good with tech here. So let's see if I can do the entire screen. And this should solve our problem. Thanks for bearing with me. So she was on this and she couldn't get off the medication for more than a few days without bawling her eyes out crying. Like literally it made her so upset. She could not handle life anymore without this. And so of course her goal was to see, can she ever get back to a normal life? Can she ever get off this medication? For those watching for the first time, FDNs do not get people off medication. That's not what I'm saying. But someone can come with a personal goal of anything that they want. Someone could say, I want to be on 5 medications. That's my goal. I'm not responsible for their goal. They can have whatever they want and they have to work with their doctor. But if someone comes to me saying that, I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, well, you'd probably need to be as healthy as possible. That would definitely give you the highest chances of that goal. So what we do to stay within our scope of practice and make sure we're keeping this person safe, because they might do things that we would never recommend, right? They'll stop the medication randomly. We cannot recommend that legally or ethically as FDNs, and you shouldn't recommend that anyway, even if you could. We want to make sure that they're getting healthy first. So Amanda and I, we did all these lab tests together, the 5 foundational labs at FDN. This is her food sensitivity test result. And we actually got her to a place within 90 days where she was able to get off the SNRI and still felt good. She didn't have the crying spells anymore. So what we learned from this test, this is how I'm thinking about it when I'm viewing it as an FDN practitioner. You're looking at 170, let me see if this was the old version. Yeah, MRT 170. It's 176 now. That's why I hesitated. This is the MRT 170. So this meant that there's 170 food and food chemicals that we tested for. And each person's order of food and food chemicals is going to be different. They base it on how reactive you are. So you might recall that I said the green is non-reactive, the yellow is like maybe you're reactive, and the red is you're definitely reactive. You also probably recall me saying the volumetric changes in the white blood cell. So when we're looking at this graph here, a lot of people might wonder, well, how the heck do you come up with this? Like, look at how subtle the difference is here between some of these greens. You look at like sorbic acid to tyramine. I mean, there's barely even a noticeable difference there. So what makes that difference? It's the size change in the white blood cell. That graph or those lines in this graph is coming up, or they're coming up with these lines in this graph based on the size changes. I guess that's the best way to say it. So over time, as their technology gets better and better, or got better and better, they were able to tell how likely you are to be sensitive to something, how likely the results correlate with the person's symptomology based on the size changes. So we know that generally speaking, these greens are going to be overall pretty solid. Although Amanda here, if I'm a good FDN, I'm already seeing that she doesn't have a lot of insanely low ones. I mean, like strawberries, pretty low. You got some things in the flavor enhancers that are low, so I guess that's good. But a lot of these chemicals, it's interesting. Her body does, seem to do something with them. But all of these in the first half here are generally fine. But then you see this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, it's getting very close. Fructose is getting close. Aspartame is getting close. Obviously, you would never want your client consuming any of these things anyway. Well, I mean, fructose is probably fine, but certainly not high fructose corn syrup. Aspartame, no. All the colors and dyes, absolutely not. But they do test for these things nonetheless. So when we see them get into a yellow or we see a very close green, that's where I'm like, let's try to remove this for some period of time. Let's try to get this to some place where, you can take some break from these foods so that we can see how you feel when you're not on them. Anything that's a stronger yellow, I'm going to jump over here to the vegetable section. Like a leek, corn, I would actually take seriously for a few reasons. Same as tomato. Tomato's a nightshade. That's why there. These I'm definitely going to want to remove for some period of time. You also might find that your client's not eating these things. So Amanda said to me, if I remember correctly, I don't eat green pea and I don't eat leek. How could I be sensitive to it? Because this is a test that does not require for you to be eating the food at the time for it to work, which is really cool if you know about food sensitivities. We don't want them to have to go through all this crap and eat these foods that are possibly damaging them just to get an accurate result. You do not need to be eating the foods to show if there is an immune reaction to them. So it's only relevant for what they currently eat, I guess. We go down here. This is where I'm starting to pay a lot more attention for Amanda. She was definitely eating avocado, yes, but she was doing more of like a high fat, moderate protein thing, kind of like keto, more like paleo. Soybean I'm interested in because even though she ate well some of the times, was trying to do that paleo thing, like I said, she was still going back and forth between that and standard American. Maybe you guys remember when you first started this dietary stuff. I know some of us go all in, like all of a sudden you're paleo, all of a sudden you're vegan, all of a sudden you're vegetarian or keto. Most people, it's kind of back and forth. They might do something like 4 or 5 days out of the week and then have a long weekend. It could be 2 or even 3 days. And that's when they're eating all the crap. So Amanda very much still had real crappy food in her life, like standard American stuff. It's so funny because I was going to say real food for a second. I'm like, that is insane that my mind has been so indoctrinated that I meant like normal food that people eat, not real food. It's not real at all. So she got exposed to soybean a lot. Why? Because soybeans in so many processed foods. It's used in a lot of restaurants, soybean oil. So this already, for me, I'm thinking about this as a practitioner, huge win here. She's eating processed foods multiple times per week, even if she's trying to eat healthier overall. She's getting exposed to this. This is a red reaction. Amanda is getting a strong immune response to this. Now, why would that matter for someone who's presenting with mental health issues? What does that have to do with anything? Because a lot of mental health issues, we now know, can stem from neuroinflammation. There's actually a meta-analysis done that showed, so a meta-analysis, for those that don't know, is a kind of report or a big study that looks at a bunch of different studies. So you know that you're getting some pretty good accurate answers there or ideas, as long as the studies that were looked at are actually good studies, I suppose. But meta-analyses are generally highly respected and highly regarded in terms of the conclusions that they come to. So what's interesting about this meta-analysis that I'm referring to support the idea of neuroinflammation is that it showed that people that took NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, this is your Aleve, this is your Advil, people who took things like that had temporary relief from mental health symptoms. Not full relief, but temporarily got some relief from things like anxiety and depression. Now, either NSAIDs have some random side effect where they boost your dopamine and serotonin, or they were reducing the inflammation. The people who conducted this meta-analysis, they must have been very smart and kind of fighting for this point of neuroinflammation, because they didn't just look at NSAIDs' effect on mental health issues. They also looked at turmeric, curcumin. They also looked at omega-3s, and if you know what those do and are, they are things that are anti-inflammatory. And they found that people who use those also found some relief from their mental health issues. I'm not saying that this is a cure. This is not to replace medication. That's ridiculous. But the fact that this impacted mental health issues at all shows you that for many people, there must be some component of neuroinflammation or inflammation in general leading to mental health issues. So why does soybean oil, when Amanda's eating it, matter so much for her goal of, hey, I'd love to feel good enough that I don't need these medications anymore? It's because neuroinflammation can lead to mental health symptoms. Does it do it for her? We were about to find out. Who knows? But it absolutely did. I kind of already told you the results that we got with her. She was feeling a lot better within 90 days. So this is how I look at this test. Huge win for this person. As opposed to picking apart all these nuts here and legumes, that might be useful, but I'm really going to want to say, hey, if you can't do anything else here, let's focus on soybean. If you can do the yellows, great, but let's definitely focus on soybean. For right now, while she's getting proteins, because proteins can be a little harder to digest anyway, if someone does not have a great gut, I'd probably try to focus them. And if I remember correctly, I did with Amanda, I'm going to focus her more towards the lower end proteins. Like the fact that turkey is so low, cool. Let's try to have that, a couple of times per week. Lamb, if you like it, pork and chicken, a little better. Beef for some people, even though I'm all for red meat, beef for people that have compromised digestive function, which she did, and the fact that it's a little closer than not to yellow here. I don't want us to develop a full food sensitivity to this. I'm going to say, hey, save this for a Friday night or more special occasions, just for a little bit while we get your gut back in check, and we should be good to go. Also, a little side note here, you can use supplementation, or you can make more accurate supplementation recommendations based on these test results. So again, this is how we're thinking like FDNs. I know this woman has mental health issues. I know what her personal goal is, and I can't do anything for that directly, but I can do all these indirect things to give her the best shot at achieving that goal of getting off medication. What did I just say about that meta-analysis? I said omega-3s help, NSAIDs help, turmeric helps, curcumin. Well, I'm not going to tell her to take a bunch of NSAIDs. That's silly. But I could say, hey, you're definitely someone that should be supplementing with turmeric, because you can see here, it's really low green for her. And you'll be surprised. A lot of people actually have a reaction to this. I think that's for a few reasons, but separate point. And if you're a really astute listener, you already know that curcumin needs black pepper, or other things, but black pepper is commonly used because it's cheap to help really get the full benefit of the effects that it has. So black pepper is also low here. So I'm going to say she should 100% be taking some type of supplement that helps with this, or has turmeric or curcumin in it, because that's going to help with some of these symptoms. And she has no reaction to it. So it's really cool. Not worried as much of basil and cinnamon. That's not a huge deal. Where I am now paying super attention, and I do this with every single test that I run with anyone with autoimmune, inflammatory conditions, mental health conditions, right in these sections here. Amanda had a sensitivity to wheat. Now, this is not the only test that you can use to develop or identify a gluten sensitivity. The Wheat Zoomer by Vibrant is probably the best test on the market for that. But hey, we're running all these markers anyway. We're looking at 175 other foods. We might as well look at wheat. And sure enough, she had a sensitivity. Now, any sensitivity to wheat, yellow or red, I treat them the same. Why? Because wheat is a unique type of food sensitivity. Does anyone know why? I'll actually pause for a second. I can't see the chat, but I will stop sharing in a second and go to it. So let me know if anyone knows why wheat is a very different type of food sensitivity compared to others. And while I do that, I'm going to go to cow's milk and yogurt down here. Oh, shocker. Another person that's sensitive to dairy. Do you think, Amanda, standard American diet half the time, paleo half the time, is consuming dairy? Of course. And so we see a red sensitivity here. No bueno. I'm going to want to remove that immediately for at least 90 days with milk to see how she responds. That could help dramatically with the inflammation that she might be dealing with. So I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second to see if anyone got this in the chat. Rihanna just read a study that correlates serotonin with histamines. This was from before, but this is still a cool comment. Let's see. That correlates serotonin with histamines. The higher the histamines, the lower the serotonin and vice versa. I'll look for the study and send it to you via support. Thank you so much. I actually would love that, especially considering one of the foundational labs at FDN, as you know, is our mucosal barrier assessment, which actually looks at histamine. So that would be very nice to know for our individuals that are out there dealing with mental health issues. I won't go back to the test results. I'll see if anyone got it. But you guys saw that she was sensitive to wheat. So why does that matter to me as an FDN practitioner and as someone who is working with a client who is dealing with mental health issues? Couple of reasons. Wheat sensitivities are different because they are very, very long and drawn out in people who develop antibodies, like specific types of antibodies to the wheat proteins. So what does that mean? It means if I eat a cracker today, and I am sensitive to wheat, a fraction of people who are sensitive to wheat might have immune reactions months later. So, I mean, I ate wheat today. I lived in a box that didn't even have wheat in it, and I'm only eating foods that are gluten-free for the next 3 to 6 months. I still could have an elevated immune response circulating in my bloodstream, causing inflammation, wreaking havoc because of one singular exposure. So if you are sensitive to gluten and you are someone that says, well, I only cheat every 2 weeks, yeah, you're better off than someone who eats it every day, but you're really not doing yourself any favors. For people that are sensitive to this or celiac or allergic, of course, that needs to be like a permanent removal type of thing. I'm a flexible guy. I'm all for like having fun. I think that once you get to a point of healing, you can handle a lot more than people think. I'll be honest, I have a Gatorade every now and then. I didn't do that for 6-7 years, but now I'm a lot healthier. I can handle that occasionally if it's the only thing around. I don't love it. I don't love the fact that the dyes are in it, but it's one exposure to some crappy toxins out of the other 360 something days that I live really well each year. You should be able to handle that when you get healthy enough. And even though I'm flexible like that, I don't do that with wheat. I never consume on purpose because of that immune response that can last for a very long time. We have some questions coming in. By the way, if you guys do have any questions in general, now is the time to drop them. I see about 30 of you on, so thanks for being here with us today. If you like Lab and Learns, I like to believe I'm smart, but I'm probably the least qualified person to be talking about other labs. That's why I stick to what I know, which is food sensitivities. I do know that very well. But you can go to the bottom right of your screen, wherever that is, and you can actually subscribe. And next week, we will have Lab and Learns back every week with Dr. Gonshore and Reed Davis, so founder of FDN and also the founder of Fluids IQ Lab. Jill, good question. Is wheat sensitivity due to glyphosate? I don't think I can say that definitively. So if I can reword the question a little bit to help you, not just to play with the words, but just to answer accurately, do I believe that glyphosate exposure leads to food sensitivities, including sensitivities to wheat? Yes, I do believe that there's something there. The way to explain this is if you're consuming something that gives you an immune reaction and you consume it with other things, it seems that some people will start developing immune reactions to that other thing. Now, I have done over 400 episodes on this podcast for FDN. Not one time have you guys ever heard me bring up the topics of, I can't even say this on YouTube because it gets censored a lot. So let's just say jabs that would go in your arm, other than the COVID one, because I think that's a whole wild thing. I never talk about that. This is not a podcast where we get into it because I don't know. I think I understand why people get skeptical, and I think there's real stories of terrible things happening when people got some of this stuff. But I don't know the full mechanism of it. I'm not trained in that. And I think we're giving out so many, and there's so many other things going on in today's world. Even though I suspect some of it's bad, I can't say that to you guys definitively. I don't like to get on here and say crap that I don't know definitively. I need to be careful. So why am I bringing this up, though? I do believe wholeheartedly that the ingredients we include in those jabs that might go into your arm are some of the reasons that people develop early childhood allergies. So egg proteins are found in certain jabs that go into your arm. Well, if I give you a kind of strong pathogen that I'm trying to have you create immune response to, and your body is new to this world because you're a kid and it sees, well, scary pathogen and also egg protein and also XYZ thing, is it fair to say that it might develop an immune response to all of that stuff or most of that stuff to try to protect you? I think that's reasonable. And I'm not just saying what I think is reasonable. There is some evidence to support that. It's not fully there yet. So Jill, to your question about is wheat sensitivity due to glyphosate, I do not think it's just due to glyphosate, but for a similar mechanism to the one I just mentioned with the arm things, I think that's what might be happening, especially in America, where we see wheat sensitivities through the roof. I think it's because we use so much glyphosate, it creates an overrepresented population. Gluten sensitivities become overrepresented in our population. Also, keep in mind, there is genetic modification and then there's genetic selection, different things. Genetic modification means we're actually going into the genes of the plant or the genes of the human and we're editing something around. Hopefully that's not happening too much in humans yet. I don't know that I'd recommend that, but we certainly do it in plants and agriculture. And so if I change something there, that's genetic engineering, that's genetic modification. Genetic selection, though, means we might start to favor certain varieties of the crop or certain varieties of the plant to get a certain result. And it just so happens that the wheat that we have genetically selected, not modified, but selected in America does seem to be different than Europeans' wheat and even a lot of the wheat in South America. So the issue with that is, are we reacting to it for that reason? Are we reacting to it because we douse a lot of this stuff in glyphosate? It's hard to say. It's a very good question and something that we should be keeping track of, but I don't know. And then in a different angle for your question, what if glyphosate is just causing so much leaky gut in people that the leaky gut is actually what's allowing all these food sensitivities to develop, and wheat's consumed in everything? Cereal for breakfast for standard Americans, sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner, cookies for a snack. So is it the glyphosate leading to leaky gut in everyone in America because we use it more than any other country? Is that leading to the wheat sensitivities? I don't know. It's probably a combination of all of them if I had to guess. Awesome question. Kim said, thanks, Ev. Have a meeting, so have to run. Awesome stuff. No problem. Damaris said, this information is certainly life-changing. Well, I'd like to believe so. Thank you. It explains a lot of self-elimination diet findings even without having the testing. Thank you. Yes, no problem. And that's why there's a debate about this, right? Because if you do an elimination diet and you do food logging, it's not that it's not going to work. You're going to see something correlate. It's just if you have the money for the test, I would consider doing it. And I do not agree for a second with the narrative that, like, some people think it's a waste to do food sensitivity testing. I would respectfully love for them to come on the podcast and we can have a healthy debate about that. Not an argument, but an actual debate. Because I cannot understand why, if someone had the money and they're willing to do it, you would not use a food sensitivity test in someone who is sensitive. My mom and I identifying that we had a sensitivity to gluten, and then knowing what a sensitivity to gluten actually means and how long the reaction can last, that's the reason that we've still removed it for all these years. That changed my mom's life. It might have saved her life, to be that honest. It definitely saved my life. Sometimes we need to see the things on paper. I didn't even really make that argument, but that's kind of a reason to run these tests too. If I never knew for sure that I had a measured immune response to gluten, do you guys really think I would have done it for 7 years without cheating? I'd like to believe that, but I think I would have cheated every few months. That's actually what I was doing before I had the food sensitivity test. I ate it about 4 to 6 times per year. Stupidest thing I could have done. Might as well have just been eating it and enjoying it once a week at that point. All right, it looks like the questions are finished up. I see 20 of you still on. I will wait for a second for any last second questions. But if you like this type of information, not only subscribe here, join us for Holistic Health Week, please. It's 100% free. There's no sales pitch for it. So it's just this massive free event. It's fdntraining.com/HHW2025. You can get registered below. And there is going to be something that we're doing with recordings. So if you can't make all 30 live events because you have a job or whatever it is, there is going to be some way to get the recordings, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, get registered there. We would love to see you guys. And that comes up in the 3rd week of March. So it starts March 17th. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week, at least for the Lab and Learn side. We have a podcast later this week as well. That's actually with the president right now of Weston A. Price Foundation. So one of the bigger guests we've ever had, and I am looking forward to seeing you guys there. We do have one more question that came in. Thank you. Okay, let me share this. How often do you recommend an MRT retest? Great question. There is a perfect world answer, and then there's the reality answer. So the perfect world answer is it would be kind of cool to see, maybe in 120 days after we really did some work on the gut, did some of these food sensitivities get better? Has removal of these foods kind of chilled the person's immune response down? So 120 days might be ideal. Practically what happens, people don't typically do that. So what I might recommend, especially if you're still living a really high stress lifestyle or you still have some symptoms going on, once a year, once every 2 years, if you have money and you're able to spend on this and you're blessed like that, do it more often. But even just once a year, just to make sure that you haven't developed a new sensitivity to foods that you're now eating all the time. Because again, man, we can be FDNs and we can work hard and we can do the best that we can, but we still have to live in today's world. We still have to operate in this Western society. And as long as that's the case, we're up against, it's kind of like pushing this thing uphill. And it's hard and it's tough. So you could develop food sensitivities to new foods that maybe you used as a replacement to your old sensitivities. So once a year would be awesome. And then I got a great presentation. Awesome. I'm glad I did something right today. All right. Well, speaking of presentations, I might have to present some ideas in a meeting pretty soon in 4 minutes. So I love you guys. Thanks for tuning on, and make sure you are subscribed, and we'll see you later this week. And then I'll see you next week if you only